Hi, and welcome to Smallforce. Smallforce is a library for Pharo Smalltalk that provides REST bindings to the Salesforce API. It does work only in Pharo 10 right now. Most of it will work with Pharo 11 and 12, but not the refactoring. I'll get to that later. To start, we actually need to do some setup in Salesforce. So let's go over to Salesforce. We're going to need a new permission set. I'm going to call this API enabled. And down here in System Permissions, go ahead, click Edit. Come down here. Under API enabled, we need that turned on. And save it. Head on over to Users. And I'm going to add that to my profile. And now we got to authenticate. So we will need I use the Salesforce CLI. It's going to look something like this. Your name at adjective animal. I didn't authenticate, so let's authenticate first. Alright, I had it on my second monitor, so you didn't see it, but I just logged in my browser window that popped up, and we should be authenticated now. Should look something like this. Let's run it. Alright, and this is just a Salesforce Trailhead playground, so don't worry about this access token. You won't be able to hack in or anything. We're going to need this information from the CLI. But before we do that, let's actually get Smallforce installed in Pharo. So back on over to Pharo. Copy and paste this. And we're just going to run it. Alright, Smallforce should be loaded now. So I can close this. And let's open a workspace or a playground and get started. So I'm going to call it SF for Smallforce. And to set up our Smallforce connection, we have to pass it the information we got from the CLI. I'll copy this. And it does have to be a string, so make that a string. And this is the instance URL. So pass that to the org message. And finally the version. So we're on v60.0. So there we go. And make sure that's all kosher. Looking good, looking good. Let's check to see if we actually have a connection to Salesforce. So I'm going to type in SF limits. This is a message that's going to get our org limits for today. I'm going to highlight this and inspect it. Oh, see, I made a mistake. I was supposed to open an inspector on it, so I just wasted an API call. Or, because Smallforce is helpful enough to cache the last response from the API, we can actually save ourselves an API call. Let's open inspector on the last response message. And we see we got a response back from Salesforce, and this is all of our org limits for today. And because Pharo has some nice built-in JSON handling, it's now a native Smalltalk object, a dictionary here. So we can do access this at daily API requests and print it. And we have 14,992 requests remaining, so this is all good. We've got our org set up and our connection working. So let's start by working with records. So I need to insert a new contact into my org. I'm going to call him Barney. Let's inspect him real quick. We see we have a contact object here. Has Salesforce fields on it. We've populated a few of them. I want to insert this into Salesforce. So let's call our Smallforce object. It's still alive. And I'm using the create record and assign ID message. All right, looks like we've got a response back. Now, if we were just inserting a record and we were going to be done with it, there is just the create record message, but this actually assigns the ID. When you insert a record, Salesforce, the API sends you an ID back. So we see we've made a new contact. This is the ID for that contact. So let's hop on over to Salesforce and see if it's actually there. And we are looking for Barney Calhoun right there. So hey, we've got this record in Salesforce, and we uploaded it from Pharo. But I forgot to set a few fields, so let's fix this real quick. I'm still in Salesforce, so I can just go here. Black Mesa. Email. Okay. So we've updated some fields in Salesforce, but now my data in Pharo isn't synced up anymore. So what do? Well, so I can manually update them. With the get field values message. Inspect that. Oh, and we see we get Barney's email and the account for Black Mesa back from the response. So I can just update those fields. Okay, so taking a look at Barney, we should see that we've manually updated the fields on the record. But there's one thing I forgot, that I should have put Barney's mobile phone in there. So and now I need to update it. I can use the update record message and the with fields argument. All right, so run that, and we get a nil back. That is actually a success. So the API, some of the requests return nil. That just means it worked. And back in Salesforce, we should see that Barney's mobile phone is updated. Hey, it's right there. Cool. You can see how cumbersome it gets to manually update fields and keep everything in sync. Smallforce does have some utilities for you to help you with programmatically syncing contacts. So let's download a contact from Salesforce. Empty contact. And I'm going to pass the record ID of Dr. Kleiner's contact information. So go to Dr. Kleiner's record, copy that, drop that in there, and do it. And then we're going to use the sync from Salesforce message. All right, let's see if it worked. And now you'll see that it downloaded all of the fields that were on the Salesforce record and put it in our local instance. Let's say I need to update Dr. Kleiner's phone number. So let's do this. The sync to Salesforce message will take all of the fields on the local instance and update them in Salesforce. And you'll see Dr. Kleiner's phone number is updated. All right, so in our org, we have a custom business process where we evaluate the public relations risk of every account. And if we think they're a PR risk, we set their public relations risk a custom field on the account object to the desired value. You can see here Umbrella Corporation is at 80%. We're going to upgrade them to 99%. Okay, and we have the Umbrella Corporation account record locally. So how do we implement this custom field on an object in Smalltalk? I'm going to open a browser on the account. And the name of our custom field. And we do use the field name, not the field label, because this is the API name. Public underscore relations underscore risk underscore underscore C. Copy that. Head on over here. I'm just going to make this a instance variable. Save that. Now there is some more setup to do. Not only do I need the instance variable, I need accessors, a getter and a setter. So you've noticed by now that Smallforce does break Smalltalk convention. The messages for all of the Salesforce fields are capitalized. That is because Smallforce dynamically generates API requests based on the message names, and to have them lowercase would introduce some complexity overhead that I didn't want to deal with. So this is much cleaner. It just works. Because I made that choice, you can just add your custom fields like this, and it will work. Because it's kind of a pain to have to refactor a bunch of lowercase messages to uppercase, I just added a refactoring included with Smallforce. This was installed when you installed Smallforce. That just makes the accessors capitalized. So generate the accessors. Head on over back to the playground. And we will set this to, we said 99. So we'll do that. Sync to Salesforce. Do it. And in Salesforce, we should see that we updated our custom field. So here's how we do custom SObjects. So to get into the terminology of Smallforce a little bit, an SObject is an abstract class that you subclass in order to create representations of your custom objects in Salesforce. So all of the prefabs that you've seen so far, the accounts and contacts and so on, these are subclasses of SObject. And in our org, we happen to have our own custom object. This is called an officer. This represents an officer that is assigned to a department. That's another custom object. And here's a list of our some of our officers here. I want to work with some of these records in Smallforce. We have to create our own custom SObject. Let's head on over to Smallforce. I'm going to create a new package for myself. I'm going to call this Smallforce Custom. And we're going to create an SObject subclass, and this will be officer. So we want to mirror the instance variables to the fields on the object in Salesforce. So we can see we've got assignment, created by ID, department, last modified by, officer name, owner ID, and rank. Some of these are default fields, some of these are custom fields. So we took all of those fields from Salesforce and made them our instance variables. We need our accessors too, so generate accessors. And you'll see we have a should be implemented. We need to have an initialize message on our subclass of SObject that defines both the API name, or sets both the API name and read-only fields, or else you won't be able to send or sync this object to Salesforce. So the read-only fields that are on this object are last modified by, created by. Install that on officer. If you're not sure which fields are read-only, you can use the describe object message. And key called fields. And each one of these fields will have a true or false on updatable. Actually, you can run this code, this little snippet right here. It's in the repo. And you can see which fields are read-only on this object. There will be some fields available on the API that aren't even visible in the object manager. That's normal. Let's grab a record. And it worked. And just to prove it, see if we updated the rank properly. And there we go. So we have our custom object implemented very, very quickly in Smallforce. Let's create some custom business logic on our custom object. So in our org, we can promote our officers. If they don't have a rank, they're a sergeant. If they're a sergeant and they get promoted, they become a lieutenant. If they're a lieutenant and they get promoted, they become a detective. And if they're a detective and they get promoted, they become a chief. If they're a chief, they cannot be promoted. So that's the custom logic. In Flow Builder, setting up that kind of branching switch statement takes a lot of clicks. We can do it in Smallforce very, very quickly. So let's head on over to Smallforce. Let's start by making a little utility method. So far, the way we've worked with our custom objects is that we've created a Smallforce instance that represents our connection to Salesforce, and then we pass SObjects to it, pass accounts to it, pass contacts to it. Whatever our object is, we pass that to Smallforce. We can invert that relationship, and that makes it a lot easier to handle our custom logic. So let's start by making a new variable on officer. It'll just be called connection. And I'll generate an accessor for that. This is not a Salesforce field, this is local. So the way Smallforce works is if you have a lowercase variable, a lowercase message name, it will not attempt to serialize that and send it to Salesforce. And the connection, I'll actually set this as a reference to Smallforce. So, and in our connection, we see we have a reference to that Smallforce connection encapsulated in our object now. So this means we can do things like this. Let's make a new message. So I want to, in order to run my custom promotion logic, I want to run it on the current Salesforce rank, not the local rank. So we'll just have a little validation there that if we don't have a connection on this object, we can't run this message. Alright, so what this does is it calls the local Smallforce connection that we have encapsulated in our object. It gets the field values on itself for rank C, and it returns that rank. And we can see this is the rank that we have on Jill in Salesforce. So even if I do something like and run that, it doesn't affect this at all because this is still the remote value. So let's create a new message. This will actually be our promotion logic. So here's what this does. Same thing as before, check to make sure our connection is good. Get the remote rank from Salesforce. This is a switch statement, so we create a dictionary. If the officer doesn't have any rank, we set that rank to sergeant. If they're a sergeant, they're a lieutenant. If they're a lieutenant, we set the new rank to detective. If they're a detective, we set the new rank to chief. If they're a chief, we can't promote a chief. And then on that dict, we pass it the current rank that we got from our message up here. And it executes the block of code that's assigned to that key in the switch statement. And then we pass to Smallforce, the local connection, update record on itself, with fields, our rank. And so, let's check Salesforce. Let's make sure Jill's a sergeant. And we just call Jill promote. See what happened. And you'll see Jill is promoted from sergeant to lieutenant. Let's run it again. And now she's a detective. So that is how you can implement your custom business logic very easily in Smallforce. One last thing you might want to do is run SQL queries. Pretty handy if you need to grab a bunch of records at once and programmatically work on all of them. just did an SOQL query on our org. And we see all of the officers that are assigned to Metro Dade. And we can do something like this. And we can see we now have a collection of all of our officers. In Smallforce, now that we have all this data, we can do whatever operations we want in a Smalltalk style. So if you want to see the rest of the messages that are available in Smallforce, they pretty much mirror the REST documentation. Lots of handy utilities, but it's mostly focused on working with records. And that's Smallforce. This is really nice if you are both a Smalltalk guy and a Salesforce professional. You can kind of bridge the gap and do a lot of really, really handy stuff with your Salesforce data in a live environment. It's very dynamic. A lot easier to work with than, say, a Flow or writing Apex or using the really, really bad Salesforce DX tooling in VS Code that takes forever to load. And it's just a pain. Check out the repo for Smallforce and give it a shot.